The dining room at the Foxhall Club was quiet in the way that only wealth could. Command velvet drapes muted the sound of traffic. Crystal glassware gleamed under the golden sconces and servers, moved with the reverence of orchestra musicians. It was 6:40 p.m. on a Friday in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the city's elite were already slipping into their regular tables, whispering over menus printed on thick parchment. At table 3, someone laughed too loudly about hedge funds. At table 9, a senator murmured over dry-aged venison. But at table 5, no one dared sit, not yet, because they all knew who it belonged to. The room changed at the moment Charles Kingsley walked in, not because of who he was, but because of who everyone knew not to be around when he was angry. 55 years old, tall, silver-streaked, dressed like he'd stepped out of a GQ cover shoot, Chaz Kingsley was more than a man. He was a storm system in a suit. One gust of his displeasure and careers vanished. Restaurants shuttered. Reputations were unmade with a single Yelp review that could read like a eulogy. He never made a reservation. He never looked anyone in the eye. And he never not once left without making someone feel small. Tonight, as his crimson Bentley disappeared behind valet doors, the air inside the Foxhall thickened. The maitre d' straightened his tie. A sommelier abandoned his wine cart mid-pour. Even the pianist mid-chord seemed to hesitate. Behind the scenes, Amara Lewis, 32, folded the last of the linen napkins before stepping out. Onto the floor for her shift. It was her first night, and within the hour she'd come face to face with the man everyone in the building feared, but she didn't know that yet. The back hallway of the Foxhall smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and starch, the kind of scent that clung to high-end places, trying to smell like nothing at all. Amara Lewis adjusted her crisp white blouse, tucking it tighter into the waistband of her black slacks. Her name tag caught the fluorescent light Amara, server. The gold letters looked too official for someone who had only stepped into this world a week ago. But she needed this job, desperately. She'd filled out the application online at 2 a.m. after spending another sleepless night worrying about rent, her car insurance, and the final notice on her utility bill. It was only a few months ago that she'd been standing in front of a classroom full of 12-year-olds teaching literature with chalk on her fingers and hope in her voice. Then came the cuts, a budget deficit, staff reductions, apologies from the school board that meant nothing. One pink slip later, and the woman who used to read Maya Angelou aloud was now memorizing the daily specials at a restaurant that charged 3 digits for a steak. Still, Amara held her head high. She had never let the world define her by circumstance. Raised by a single mother who worked nights in a hospital laundry room and still managed to make pancakes every Sunday morning, Amara had inherited more than work ethic, she'd inherited backbone. Table 12 wants a wine pairing suggestion, came a voice from behind. It was Marcy, the lead server, short and snappy but surprisingly kind. Also avoid table 5 tonight. Amara glanced up. What's at table 5? Marcy exhaled sharply, as if the words themselves required courage. Charles Kingsley. The name settled in the air like a warning. Is he? A critic, Amara asked, unbothered. Marcy's laugh was dry. Worse. He's the kind of man who tips $5 on a $1,000 meal just to prove a point. The kind of man who tells you he's allergic to onions after you bring out the food he specifically ordered with onions. Amara arched an eyebrow. You're saying he's a nightmare. I'm saying he's untouchable. Loud, rich, and allergic to being wrong. Amara didn't flinch. I've worked triple shifts at chain diners where angry dads threw plates and teenagers filmed me cleaning it up. I'll manage. Marcy gave her a look, not quite pity, not quite admiration. I hope so, she murmured. But here, one wrong move with a guy like Kingsley, and it's not just your job on the line. It's your name, your dignity. Amara paused, then looked past the swinging kitchen door toward the elegant dining room. Beyond, the chandeliers glowed like halos over polished marble. Conversations were muted, elegant, insulated. She knew she didn't belong, but she wasn't about to shrink. Not tonight. A voice crackled in her earpiece. Table 5 is here. Kingsley's seated. Marcy flinched. Amara didn't. She pulled in a breath, stepped out from the back corridor, and let the atmosphere of the Foxhall swallow her whole. She didn't know yet that before the night was over, her name would be trending online. She didn't know that the man at table 5 would push her further than anyone had dared. But she knew one thing. She'd rather walk out with her dignity than tiptoe forever around men who mistook cruelty for power. And with that, Amara Lewis walked toward table 5. Table 5 was positioned like a throne center of the room, just far enough from the kitchen. Doors to avoid the scent of truffle oil and grilled duck, but close enough to survey. Every other guest like a king watching over his court. And there he was. Charles Chaz Kingsley seated alone in a high-backed leather chair, legs crossed with calculated arrogance, phone in hand, ignoring the menus the maître d' had placed before him. His suit was dark navy, tailored to perfection. His cufflinks shimmered platinum, probably custom. He didn't glance up when Amara approached. She stopped precisely 18 inches from the table, just like she'd been trained, and offered the warmest version of a welcome she could muster. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to begin with a drink?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he finished typing whatever message he was writing, then slowly looked up. His gaze landed on her face, trailed to her name tag, then settled back on her eyes. "New," he said flatly. "Yes," Amara replied evenly. "First week. He said it like a judgment, not a fact. She didn't blink. Chaz leaned back, still appraising her. "You know what I hate about new staff?" he asked, tapping his phone on the table. "They always try too hard. Or worse, they think they matter." Amara kept her expression neutral. She could feel the shift in the air around them, the way a few nearby diners quieted ever so slightly, just enough to eavesdrop without looking obvious. "I'll take a glass of the Chateau Margaux 2009, he said finally. "If you don't know what that is, ask someone who does." She nodded. "Of course." As she turned to walk away, his voice cut through the space like a blade. "And make sure the glass is room temperature this time. Last week it came out like it had just been pulled from a dishwasher. Amateur hour." Amara paused only for a second, just long enough for the insult to land. Then she kept walking, heels clicking against the marble back, straight hands calm. In the kitchen, Marcy met her at the wine fridge, eyes wide. "Well," she whispered. Still breathing barely, Amara muttered. She reached for the Margaux, checked the label, double-checked the vintage, and let the bottle rest. For 30 seconds before even considering the pour. Her fingers were steady, but her pulse wasn't. Not from fear, but from something else. Rage, perhaps. The kind that didn't show in your face, but gathered in your spine. By the time she returned to the table, glass in hand, Chaz had already placed his phone face down and was glancing around the room with detached boredom. She placed the wine gently in front of him, stem angled perfectly. He picked it up, swirled it without, thanks, sniffed, sipped, and then wrong. He spat the word out like a spoiled bite. "What is this?" he demanded. Amara's throat tightened. "That is the Chateau Margaux you requested, sir?" "No," he snapped. "This is the 12-9. Impossible. It's too tight. It's not breathing." "Did you decant it?" she had. For exactly the time the sommelier had trained her, but she didn't argue. "I followed the house protocol, sir." He leaned forward. "House protocol," he repeated mockingly. "Let me explain something to you, Amara, since you're new. Protocol is for fast food. This is the Foxhall. I pay to be above protocol." Amara didn't respond, not with words. She met his gaze with something deeper than defiance, something that said, "I see you, and I'm still here." Across the room, the pianist resumed playing. Conversations picked up again. The moment passed, but not really. Because Amara had just learned two things. First, Chaz Kingsley didn't just want to be served. He wanted to be worshipped. And second, he was testing her, and he wasn't done yet. The second course began to arrive. Around the room, servers floated like ghosts, smooth-trained, nearly invisible. Plates of saffron risotto and duck confit glided from kitchen to table without a sound. But at table 5, the air vibrated with tension. Chaz had finished half his wine, but none of his attitude. He barely touched the foie gras. Instead, he kept making comments, little barbs, not loud enough to cause a scene, but sharp enough to draw blood. "This is lukewarm," he muttered, nudging the plate with his knife. "You know, back in Paris, chefs would be fired for serving this." Amara stood beside the table, hands folded, smile professional. I can bring the chef's attention to it if you'd like. No, he interrupted. I don't need explanations. I need competency. He looked up, eyes narrowing. Tell me something, Amara. Before this job, what did you do? Nail salons, retail, or just good at carrying things with a smile? Amara's jaw tensed. I was a teacher, she said quietly. Literature and writing. He chuckled, actually chuckled. A teacher? Of course. That explains the tone. Always correcting, always thinking you're the smartest in the room. She didn't answer, but something in her chest flinched. Nearby, a couple exchanged glances. The young man frowned slightly. The woman touched her wine glass, but didn't sip. Conversation softened again. Amara forced her shoulders down. Will there be anything else for now, Chess? Chaz said. Some humility. Maybe ask one of the experienced servers to train you before you ruin another bottle. Amara turned, walking away, before the sting fully reached her face. In the kitchen, Marcy was prepping creme brulee. She glanced up as Amara pushed through the door. How bad, she asked. Amara didn't answer right away. She just stared at the wall for a moment, hands trembling. Marcy set down the blowtorch and crossed her arms. Do not let him get under your skin, she said. That's his game, every week. He smells fear like perfume. Amara nodded, but something deeper was unraveling, because it wasn't just the insult. It was the pattern. He was used to people swallowing his cruelty with a smile, and the room had learned to absorb him, to keep quiet to survive. But why? Was money really enough to make people invisible to their own pain? Wasn't that why she had left teaching? Because the system had asked her to keep her head, down to accept less to endure. Now here she was again, quiet, dignified, and slowly breaking. She looked at herself in the kitchen mirror. The reflection was crisp, clean shirt, smooth bun, professional stance. But her eyes were different. They weren't tired. They were waking up. A call came through her earpiece. Table 5 is asking for the sommelier. Amara breathed deep. She wiped her palms on her apron. I'll go, she said before anyone else could answer. Marcy blinked. You sure? Amara nodded. Yeah, she said softly. Let's see how far he's willing to go. Chaz Kingsley wasn't just a customer anymore. He was a mirror reflecting everything she'd been told to tolerate. And something inside Amara was done pretending. When Amara returned to table 5, the room was quieter than it had any right to be on a Friday night. The pianist had shifted into something softer, almost imperceptible. The tables around Chaz seemed to lean back ever so slightly. Diners huddled deeper into their conversations, pretending not to watch. But they were watching. Chaz sat with his jacket unbuttoned, now elbow resting over the back of his chair like a king who had long since conquered the land. In front of him sat a half-finished lamb, loin untouched since it had arrived. You again, he said as Amara approached. Didn't I ask for someone with wine knowledge? She answered with the same even tone she'd practiced all night. I'm certified in level 2 wine service, sir. I'd be happy to help. He didn't reply. Instead, he raised the glass she had served earlier, held it up to the chandelier light, and tilted it dramatically. Then, without warning, he spat it back into the glass. The sound was loud, disrespectful, meant to draw attention. And it did. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The pianist's hands paused just long enough for the silence to settle in. Is this a joke? Chaz said, voice rising. Do you people serve vinegar and call it Bordeaux now? Amara stood still, breath tight in her chest. You requested Chateau Margaux 2009, she said, calm but firmer now. That's what I poured. I confirmed it twice. Chaz leaned forward. His smile had a cruel slant. Did you, he said. Or are you just trying to bluff your way through a job you clearly weren't meant? For Amara didn't answer. He kept going. You know I've had dogs trained to fetch better than you serve. There was no pretense of subtlety anymore. No mask of charm. Just pure gleeful degradation. A couple at the next table froze, eyes wide. Across the room, a server dropped a spoon. A man in a tailored suit shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Someone near the bar whispered, "He's doing it again." And then it happened. Chaz lifted the wine glass and flung it. It wasn't a full toss, just enough to make a point. But it hit the edge of the table, shattered like an accusation, and sprayed deep red. Liquid across Amara's white blouse. A sharp gasp cut through the restaurant like a blade. Wine trickled down her shirt. A shard of glass rolled toward her foot. The smell of grapes and arrogance filled the air. No one moved. Even the pianist stopped playing now. Somewhere in the distance, a waiter cursed under his breath. Amara stood motionless, not shaking, not weeping, just breathing. Slow measured, deliberate. Chaz leaned back smug. "I'll be expecting a refund," he said. "And a manager? Clearly you're not ready for real service." She didn't look down. She didn't apologize. Instead, she stepped forward slowly, like someone crossing a thin rope over a canyon. One hand found her hip. The other pointed not rudely but directly toward him. And then, in a voice clear enough to echo off Crystal, "You're right," she said. "I am done." A flicker of confusion danced across Chaz's eyes. "I've cleaned up after men like you my whole life. Men who think money is a license to spit on dignity. Who throw tantrums like toddlers and call it sophistication." Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Chaz opened his mouth, but she didn't let him. "You don't build people. You break them. You humiliate staff because it makes you feel powerful. But here's the truth." Her voice was stronger now. "You've never earned respect. You've only ever bought fear." The dining room was frozen. Even the ice in the champagne bucket seemed to hold its breath. Chaz's jaw dropped. He looked around expecting backup, but none came. Across the room, a waiter stopped mid-step. A man set down his fork. A woman near the bar clutched her pearls but didn't look away. And Amara wasn't done. "I've been broke. I've worked 3 jobs. I've seen my mother clean hospital floors at midnight and still come home singing. So don't you dare think you can throw wine at me and expect silence." Footsteps echoed. Suddenly behind her, it was the manager, Mr. Elliot, wide-eyed, breathless. "Amara, what's going on?" Chaz rose to his feet. "She insulted me," he barked. "I want her gone. Right now." Amara didn't move. Her shirt was stained, but her back was straighter than ever. Mr. Elliot looked torn, glancing between the furious millionaire and the soaked waitress. I'll go get the owner," he muttered. Chaz smirked. "Yes, please do." But what none of them knew, the owner had already seen everything. The silence was sharp enough to cut glass. Charles Kingsley adjusted his cufflinks as if nothing had happened. His eyes sparkled with confidence. Not the kind that came from truth, but the kind built on years of never hearing the word no. Amara stood firm, soaked in wine, her blouse clinging to her skin, crimson seeping down like war paint. But her eyes were fire. She didn't shake. She didn't shrink. All around them the diners waited. Some curious, some guilty, some reaching discreetly for their phones. A few already recording. And then from the far side of the dining room, a voice broke the silence. That's enough. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room turned as one. From the corner table, a spot rarely occupied, stood a tall man in his late 60s. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed. His blazer, unassuming, his shoes, shined but modest. He moved like someone used to watching more than speaking. It was Mr. Eli Barrow, the owner of the Foxhall. And in that moment, no one, not even Charles Kingsley, spoke over him. Chaz blinked. His smirk faltered just slightly. "Eli," he said with a forced chuckle. "Didn't know you were in tonight." "I was Mr." Barrow replied calmly, walking slowly toward the scene. "Been here since 6. Corner table? I watched the entire thing." Chaz laughed again, but there was a crack in it now. "Well, then you saw how unprofessional this all was. She insulted me, in front of everyone." Barrow didn't flinch. "I saw how you spat wine through a glass and degraded a member of my staff. In full view of an entire dining room," he said evenly. A collective breath caught. Chaz stepped forward. "I don't think you understand what's at stake here. Do you know how much money I brought into this place? How many high-net clients follow my recommendations?" Eli Barrow turned fully to him now. His voice never rose, but it pressed down like stone. "Yes," he said. "I do. I know your influence, your reputation, and I've tolerated your presence longer than I should have for those exact reasons." Amara stood still, her breath shallow, her hands clenched at her sides. "But tonight," Barrow continued, "I watched a woman maintain her dignity while being publicly humiliated. I watched her show more composure and grace in 5 minutes than you have in all the years I've known you, The room was dead silent. "Let me be clear," Barrow said now, speaking not just to Chaz, but to everyone in the room. "This restaurant was built from scratch. No investors, no seed money. Just my grandmother's recipes and 20 years of sweat. I didn't survive 3 recessions just to turn this place into a playground for people who confuse wealth with worth." He turned to Mr. Elliot, the manager, who still stood frozen. "Promote Amara. Effective immediately. Floor manager." A stunned murmur rippled through the diners. Elliot opened his mouth, then nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Chaz's face was white now, like someone realizing they weren't holding the cards after all. You're promoting her?" he stammered. After she disrespected a guest, no, Barrow said, eyes locked on him. "I'm honoring someone who stood up for herself with courage and clarity. Something we should have done a long time ago." "And what about me?" Chaz asked. The question was hollow now. "You're banned," Barrow said simply. Chaz choked on his own laugh. "You can't be serious." "I am. Leave. Tonight. And don't return." No one moved to help him. No one offered to intervene. Not the manager. Not the staff. Not the wealthy regulars who used to clamor for his attention. The silence around Amara was no longer fear. It had shifted into respect. And then, like a slow-building wave, someone clapped. Just one. Then another. Then the entire left side of the restaurant joined in. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just real. Chaz Kingsley walked out alone. No dessert. No entourage. No fanfare. Just the quiet echo of footsteps and the end of his reign. The next morning, the internet woke up before the city did. It started with a short video, grainy, shaky, clearly recorded from behind a half-empty glass of wine. The caption read, "She finally said what we've all wanted to say." Amara, Foxhall incident. In the 30-second clip, you could see a woman in a wine-stained white shirt, standing tall, finger-pointed voice, unwavering. "You've never earned respect. You've only ever bought fear." By 9 a.m., it had 400,000 views. By noon, over 2.1 million. Talk shows started replaying the moment in slow motion. Influencers praised her poise. Former restaurant workers across the country began sharing their own horror stories using hashtags like I was Amara. Dignity is not optional, and service is not servitude. On Reddit, someone posted a long thread. "I used to work at the Foxhall. I saw Charles Kingsley make a hostess cry because the champagne was too cheerful. He once made a dishwasher lose his job. Seeing Amara speak up, God, I wish I had the guts back then." The city buzzed. Local news interviewed a couple who had witnessed the incident. A podcast dedicated an entire episode to the waitress who broke the silence. A national newspaper ran a feature, "The Woman Who Made the Room Stop Breathing." How one voice shattered years of silent abuse in fine dining. And Charles Kingsley, well, silence had never sounded so loud. 2 of his business partners cut ties within days, citing concerns about reputational harm and a pattern of behavior not aligned with our values. His firm, Kingsley Development, quietly removed his photo from their homepage. Rumors swirled of investors pulling out. Lawsuits from ex-employees resurfaced. People were finally listening. Back at the Foxhall, things shifted. Not overnight, but visibly. The staff walked straighter. Jokes returned to the break room. Mr. Barrow made it a habit to sit in the dining room more often, not to supervise, but to witness. Amara, now wearing a sleek Navy manager's vest, stood beside the hostess stand one evening when a young server approached her nervously. "I saw the video," he said quietly. "I didn't know. It was okay to say something." Amara looked at him soft and steady. "It wasn't," she said. "Not before." But now she glanced around the restaurant. The lighting hadn't changed. The marble floors still gleamed, but there was something new in the air. "Now it is." A small gold plaque had appeared near the entrance, elegant, simple. It read, "Respect is the dress code." Manager Amara Lewis, she hadn't asked for it. She hadn't expected it, but it was there, permanent. Some guests took photos with it. Others simply read it and stood a little taller. That night, just before closing, Amara walked past table 5, now occupied by a quiet, elderly couple, sharing dessert. The same table, the same light above it, but no longer a place of fear. She paused just for a second. No fanfare, no drama, just memory and release. 3 days after the video went viral, Amara's inbox had over 600 unread messages. Some were from strangers, servers, baristas, nurses, teachers. People who had been stepped on for so long they forgot what it felt like to stand tall. They thanked her. They called her brave. They called her them. Others were invitations. From news outlets, from talk shows, from corporations wanting her to speak about resilience at their annual retreats. One university even offered to host a panel titled Grace Under Fire Lessons from the Foxhall. Amara read them late at night, curled on the small couch in her apartment, still wearing her work pants, a cup of tea going cold beside her. But her mind wasn't in the emails. It was with her mother, 2 states away, who had called that morning. Is it true, her mother had asked? The video someone showed me at the hospital. Amara had hesitated. Yeah, Mama, it's true. There was a long pause. And then, I'm proud of you, baby. But I'm not surprised. Amara blinked away tears she didn't even know she was holding. You taught me to stand up, she whispered, even when it's uncomfortable. I didn't think you were listening all those years. I was Amara, said. I just didn't know when I'd need it. That night she stared at herself in the mirror again, but not the mirror in the kitchen at the Foxhall. This one was in her bedroom, the one that had cracks along the edges and still had post-it notes from when she was preparing for teacher certification exams. She looked different now. Same face, same eyes, but something underneath had shifted. Not confidence, something quieter, heavier, like someone who had just crossed a line and couldn't go back. Because the truth was, she hadn't planned to be brave. She hadn't woken up that morning hoping to be on the news or to trend on social media. She just didn't want to feel powerless anymore. And yet, here it was a second chance, not just at a better job, but at a voice, at reclaiming parts of herself that years of quiet professional endurance had buried. But the fame didn't excite her, not the interview offers, not the praise. Because for every positive comment, there was also a darker shadow online, people questioning her story, dissecting her tone, accusing her of making a scene or worse, calling her aggressive, ungrateful, just another waitress playing victim. She read some of them. She didn't flinch. Because once you've been drenched in wine and stared a bully in the face with your name, your story, and your voice intact, there's not much left in the world that can shame you. Still, the noise was exhausting. So she turned off her notifications, unplugged for a while, and walked to a small bookstore. Down the block, the kind with creaky floors and a sleepy cat by the window. She bought a journal. On the first page, she wrote, I don't know what comes next, but I know who I am now, and I'm not shrinking again. The following Monday, the sunlight spilled across the floor of the Foxhall like it always did. Everything looked the same. The polished marble, the faint scent of rosemary butter, the quiet hum of a new week beginning. But Amara, she was no longer the same woman who had walked in here 8 nights ago, holding a tray and trying not to be noticed. She stood now near the host's stand, clipboard in hand, scanning the floor plan, adjusting the server rotations, exchanging brief eye contact with the new hires who looked at her like she carried answers. Because she did. Respect wasn't just written on the plaque by the door. It followed her, in posture, in presence. But even as she managed the floor, kept things flowing and ensured the wine list was updated properly for spring, something tugged at her. There were envelopes in her handbag unread. One from a non-profit that advocated for workplace rights. Another from a publishing house that had seen her journal excerpt shared online. They wanted her to write, speak, lead, step outside the walls of this place. That night after closing, Mr. Eli Barrow asked her to stay behind. He'd just finished wiping down the counter himself, a habit he never gave up, despite owning the whole building. He handed her a steaming cup of coffee. No ceremony, no desk between them, just 2 people in the quiet. I got a call today, he said, sipping. A woman from a law firm downtown said she saw your clip, said she wants you to speak at a corporate summit next month. Something about workplace culture and resilience. Amara raised an eyebrow. She called you, he smiled. Apparently you're hard to reach, she smiled softly. I turned off most notifications. Just needed space. Barrow nodded. She also said they'd pay you well. More than well. Amara looked down. She wasn't sure if it was guilt or confusion bubbling up inside her. I never meant for this to become a movement, she murmured. It wasn't some mission. I just couldn't take it anymore. I know, he said. I'm not an activist. He shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe you're just a person who did the right thing out loud, and sometimes that's all the world needs. They sat in silence for a while. Then he asked the question she had been avoiding. What do you want to do next? The words hung there like a lit match. Amara didn't answer right away, because for the first time in a long time, she had choices. She could stay, build something real at the Foxhall, mentor younger staff, set a new standard for what leadership could look like in hospitality, or she could take the fire that had accidentally been lit beneath her feet and walk with it to rooms that still hadn't learned what dignity looked like, to boardrooms, to classrooms, to stages. She stared at the steam rising from her cup. I don't know, she admitted. Barrow nodded. Then take your time. She looked up. You're not afraid I'll leave? He chuckled. No, because even if you do what you stood for, we'll stay. And this place will be better because of you, whether you're here or not. Amara's throat tightened, because for the first time, she realized she wasn't afraid of staying. She wasn't afraid of leaving. She just wanted to choose on her own terms, and that was a freedom she'd never had before. The first time Amara Lewis stood behind a podium, her hands shook, not visibly, not enough for anyone else in the room to notice. But she felt it in her pulse, in her palms, in the small flutter in her throat, that quiet panic that always comes before doing something real. The summit was hosted in a high-rise conference center downtown. Glass windows wrapped the room in skyline. Every seat was filled with someone in business attire, name tags printed in bold font company, logos etched onto notebooks and pens, HR managers, CEOs, culture consultants, all staring up at her waiting to hear the waitress who had made a billionaire walk out of a fine dining restaurant. She'd rehearsed, she'd written her speech, practiced it, cut it, rewritten it again. But when she stepped up to the mic, she set the papers down. She just breathed. Then she spoke. I wasn't brave. I was tired. The room went still. I didn't plan to speak out that night. I didn't rehearse a speech in the mirror or think about who might be recording. I just couldn't shrink anymore. She told them about the Foxhall, about Chaz Kingsley, about the wine, the silence. The moment she decided that her dignity didn't have to wait for anyone else's permission. But then she said something none of them expected. I'm not here to shame a man who threw a tantrum. That's too easy. What matters is the room that let it happen. She let that sit. We've all been in those rooms. Some of you have led them. There was a hush now, not defensive, reflective. I'm not here because I said something powerful. I'm here because I said something simple. Out loud. And people weren't used to that kind of honesty surviving. She didn't speak long, 20 minutes maybe. But when she stepped down, the room stood. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was a rising one, slow, intentional, like people realizing they weren't just clapping for her. They were clapping for every moment they themselves had stayed quiet when they should have spoken. Afterward, people lined up to speak with her. Some shared their own stories. Some said nothing, just shook her hand and looked her in the eye in that quiet, grateful way. As she stepped outside into the spring air, sun low on the buildings, she didn't feel like a symbol. She felt like Amara, a girl from a working-class neighborhood who once taught poetry to kids who'd never been told. Their voices mattered. A daughter who grew up watching her mother scrub floors and still hum gospel on the bus home. A woman who'd had her blouse ruined in front of a room full of people and still walked out standing taller than when she walked in. And now she was being asked to walk into new rooms, but on her terms. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Barrow. We hired a new floor manager. She's green, but she's got that fire. Thought you might want to come meet her. No pressure, just dinner. She smiled. She didn't know yet whether her future was on stage on paper in politics or in quiet conversations that changed one mind at a time. But she knew this. She had earned the right to choose. Months passed. Not in a blur, but in quiet revolutions each day, turning just enough to reveal something new. Amara Lewis never returned to the same version of herself she had been before that night at the Foxhole. But she never became someone entirely different either. She simply became more herself. The media noise faded as it always does. New headlines came. New stories caught the world's attention. And Amara was fine with that. Because she hadn't spoken out for attention. She'd spoken because it was time. Now she spent her days choosing what to say yes to. She guest lectured at a local college just once, but enough to see the fire in a room, full of students who'd never imagined that standing up could look like wine down your shirt and truth in your voice. She consulted quietly with businesses, not to scold, but to teach. How to create workspaces where silence wasn't the only way to survive. How to hear before harm happens. And sometimes on quiet afternoons, she walked back into the Foxhole. She didn't manage the floor anymore. But she'd sit at the back table near the window, order a pot of mint tea, and smile as she watched the staff move with ease, no one shrinking, no one bracing. And near the front, still gleaming beneath soft lighting, hung the small gold plaque, "Respect is." The dress code. Manager Amara Lewis guests still paused to read it. Some smiled, some nodded, some didn't notice at all. But it didn't matter, because the point was never the plaque. It was the space it created, the permission it gave. One evening, as Amara left the restaurant, a young woman held the door open for her. She wore a Foxhole apron, her ponytail slightly uneven, hands nervously fidgeting. "Miss Lewis," she asked. Amara paused. The girl looked nervous. I just wanted to say, thank you. I'm working here now, and when I'm scared, I think about what you did. And it helps me breathe." Amara smiled soft and real. "Then keep breathing," she said. "That's how it starts." They parted ways. No cameras, no applause. Just footsteps down a quiet street in early evening light. Because sometimes courage doesn't end in thunder. Sometimes it ends in peace. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own silence or your own moment of truth, don't forget to subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs it. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever spoken up when it wasn't easy, or wished you had? We read every word. And remember, your voice matters. Until next time, stay kind, stay grounded, and never bow when you were born to stand.